How do you feel about the school dispensing medical advice without the consent of parents, i.e. abortion, birth control pills, sex changes? That's a horrible question to ask. It's a hard one, but do you think that the parents have an absolute right to be involved in those decisions?
So with my medical background, I would say that we would follow the law, and that would be my opinion, is to follow the guidelines that have been set. There is a school health center, and that they would be following the guidelines that are set in place that they have to follow. So that's where I would stand, is from the law.
But would you, from a personal point of view, be happier with the parents participating in those decisions?
So again, with my medical background, I usually try to not have my opinion. I usually want to know what the law and what the guidelines are, and those are what I stick to, because that is what I'm beholden to. So with a school-based health center, they would be beholden to the law, so they would have guidelines set for what they could and could not do.
But if the guidelines allow parental participation and such concerns, do you believe it's a good idea to include the parents in those decisions?
It would be up to the student and the guidelines. I would not. It would be up to the medical-based center then and what the guidelines that the medical-based center had. So whatever the medical facility was at that location, that would be the guidelines that I would recommend following, because it's their license and their responsibility that's on the line.
Are you familiar with the state sexual education curriculum? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Familiar enough. And then once again, like I said earlier, is the parents have to be the choosers of this. So if they do not agree with the curriculum, there must be an option for their kids to go out, take a wilderness survival class or something like that, and give the parents the full option, because it truly is their children.
So when it comes to health issues and people can choose to transition to another gender or seek an abortion or acquire
Honestly,
pills. Do you have any concerns about that?
Yes,
Any
sir.
Personal feelings about you? What I'm after is how far should parents be involved in those decisions?
100% on those decisions. Those are their kids, and they know their kids better than anybody else. They've been changing their diapers since they're little kids. They know their character, they know their demeanor. So for somebody else to jump in there and think they know a little more about your children would be just crazy, straight crazy and arrogance. You're welcome, sir.
I will start it out with any nominations.
Do we need to nominate if we're doing a private ballot?
We need to nominate if we're doing we can't do a secret ballot. We have to nominate.
Oh, so we're not using.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
our secret ballots, if we nominate both of them, then we vote secretly?
No,
Or everything has to be done publicly?
It has to be done publicly. It has to be public record.
I've been deceived here.
Yeah. So
Well, I nominate Nigel Ruska.
I'll second that.
okay, we have a nomination for Nigel. Any discussion? You guys are talkative today.
I think we asked all our questions
Yep,
to them directly.
That is true. We've had the last couple hours.
To tell you the truth, they either liked their answers, or you didn't like your answers, so you thought all their answers were good. So it's up, as I feel, it's just up to the boards to take the answers, mull through them, and make your selection. Unless anybody has any questions, I don't have any further questions, and
So, I think the issues that face us aren't always cut and dry. So I appreciate direct answers, but I also appreciate a willingness to understand that sometimes things aren't exactly as they seem once you learn about all of the idiosyncrasies. So I appreciated also sometimes the pause to consider there might be more to this question than what meets the eye, because I think as school board members, if we are too quick to answer some of the questions facing our district, sometimes we miss out on views or input that is needed in the community from our constituents. So I appreciated that direct answers also. It always makes it easy in an interview. But I also was concerned by some of how direct that was and how quick, in that sometimes we need to listen and think a little more broadly than what is first to mind.
So there I go. I would say that it was interesting to learn their preferences. Unfortunately, this board, anybody that comes to this board doesn't really know what we do. Like some of the questions answered is they're discussing employees. The only employee we have is you, Mr. Dave. And we really don't have direct control over anybody, an employee we have. We face the brunt of the controversies. Any decision that we make has to be ultimately in compliance with state law, and any difficult decision we have to run by an attorney to keep us out of trouble from paying fines. So I don't expect anybody to come to this table and really understand what we do. What I'm trying to figure out is where I'd go the exact opposite. I would like to know what their personal preferences were, should the opportunity become available to change state policy or to go a different direction. So I was more after personal stuff than the general broad notion of what does a school board do. We just set general broad policy, pay the bills, and torture Dave. And that's largely what we do. And so I think a bigger question of where we're headed ultimately, are we in conflict with the state, or how far we can go, or how far somebody's views reflects the local community as opposed to the statewide community? All this is interesting to me. So anyway, I enjoyed all their answers. It's I have my preference on who to pick, but I enjoyed everybody's answer. They answered as best they could. But you don't know anything about this board until you're on it, in my opinion. And I've been here since September, and until we at least go through one budgeting session. And that's when I'm going to feel that at least I passed the first level of what a board member should be in figuring out what we do. Up until now, all we've been doing is largely passing contracts that are non-controversial, which is part of our job. But in truth, I think it takes at least a year or 2 years to be on this board to understand what we really do and how to navigate it. So it's so basically I don't question any of their answers. I thought they were all good answers. I just have my preference.
Any other discussion on practicing Robert's rules before I speak last?
You will ask for additional nominations, correct? Because we're doing.
It depends on how the vote goes.
We'll vote for this, okay.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna share just a couple thoughts. And this is my thoughts from a board chair standpoint. I personally see this process as rushed. I personally view this as you have elected me board chair for one of the, probably because you didn't have anybody else to elect and you felt like, hey, we'll stick this guy with this.
It was enjoyable.
But I have, yeah, it was enjoyable. But I have 2 first-year board members who I haven't taken through the budget process yet, that I want to have scrutinize that budget process. And I think, from a wisdom standpoint, I would prefer you to see that budget process and see all the considerations before we select a board budget or a board member. I have a second thought on this, and is I've seen what happens with boards. I've been on several of them where we have non-elected board members. And it is a path that I am hoping to avoid. And I think we have 4 board members right now that don't necessarily always agree, but we do agree that we want to focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, and roofs. And there are 1,000 subsets to that. But I am right now where I stand going into the budgeting process. I am focused on Pat and Nancy's education as board members. I have 4 strong board members. I am comfortable where we're at. So I'm just, as board chair, and this isn't anything against Stacy or Nigel at all. But I'm not going to affirm on either one.
So something you might look into. The vote that didn't happen for the vacant school board seat is what I wanted to speak on tonight. And a reasoning was given for not taking the vote in that you have a budget coming up. And it's really difficult for new school members to go through the process of learning the budget. But I would just like to encourage the board to visit filling that vacant board seat much more quickly. The reason being because Three Rivers is broken up into 5 zones so that because it's just so spread out. And leaving the Illinois Valley board seat vacant really deprives that that area of a voice in the budget that you're talking about. So I think it's very important to consider there's a huge population out there that need to be represented, especially in a budget. And your district has put together processes to fill vacant board seats and considerations for difficulties of getting through a budget process should not supersede following the processes to fill a vacant seat. So I just wanted to encourage the board to revisit sooner filling that board position.
Secondly, I do question today's decision to postpone the selection of a school board member. And I also think that it warrants a thorough investigation on the relationship between the former board prior to Pat and Nancy coming aboard and their connections on the outside of the school board activities. And wanted to go on record saying that I feel that having sat through these interviews that Nigel Heskred did a very well job and should have been selected. Thank you very much.